You've heard this story 100 times. Strand a group of boys on an island, and they slowly turn into savages. That's the plot of Lord of the Flies, a novel millions of kids read in school. But here's what they never told you. In 1965, it actually happened. For real. 6 real boys, 1 deserted island, 15 months cut off from the world. And what they did will shock you, because the truth is the exact opposite. This is the real story, and it's wild. It begins in Tonga, a scatter of islands in the South Pacific, at a strict Catholic boarding school, where 6 teenage boys felt completely trapped. Same bell, same rules, same walls, every day. Their names were Sione, Stephen, and Kolo, along with David, Luke, and Mono. One evening, Sione had a crazy idea. "Let's sail away," he told his friends. "Let's escape and explore a real island." The others laughed at him at first. No permission, no boat, no money. Impossible. But Sione had already planned it all. "We leave at night," he said. "We explore, sleep, and return by morning. Nobody will even know we were gone." One by one, every boy said yes. Their dream target was Fiji, but they had no idea how far that was. Hundreds of kilometers of brutal open ocean. First, though, they needed a boat, and no way on earth to buy one. Near the school, fishermen docked their boats. So the boys made a reckless choice. They'd borrow 1 boat for a single night, take it, explore, and return it by dawn. That night, while everyone slept, they crept out. They grabbed food, a small stove, and ran. They reached the docks, climbed aboard a small fishing boat, and pushed off into the dark. No map, no compass, no adult on board, just 6 boys and the endless ocean. At first, it honestly felt like total freedom, the island lights slowly shrinking and fading behind them. Exhausted, the boys fell asleep, one by one, on the open deck. And that was their first deadly mistake, because at night, the open sea is anything but calm. While they slept, the wind quietly turned, and slowly, the waves began to climb higher and higher. A huge wave smashed the boat and threw every boy awake. They lunged for the sail, fighting to steer through the chaos. But it was hopeless. The storm ripped their sail to shreds. Then it snapped the wooden rudder clean off the back. Now they couldn't steer at all. They were completely helpless. The waves hurled the tiny boat wherever they wanted. By the time morning came, the storm had finally worn itself out and faded away. But the boat was wrecked, broken, and drifting blind. No sail, no steering, no idea where they were. And here's the terrifying part. This drifting lasted 8 days. 8 days with barely any food and almost no water. They caught little sips of rainwater whenever they could, and split every single drop equally among all 6. Remember that detail. Even starving, they shared everything. Then, on day 8, someone shouted and pointed ahead. Far in the distance, rising out of the gray water, stood a huge, dark island. For one moment, every boy felt pure joy, saved at last. But reaching that island became a nightmare of its own. The wrecked boat had 0 control left, so the boys leaned over the sides and paddled with bare hands. Slowly, painfully, they dragged themselves toward the shore. When they finally landed, they looked up and froze. In front of them rose towering, jagged cliffs. This was nothing like the friendly tropical island they had pictured in their heads. This was a forgotten place called Eta, and the truth about Eta is genuinely chilling. People had lived there generations earlier, but long before, slave traders had raided the island. They took its people, and the survivors were moved away forever. Since then, Eta had sat completely empty and forgotten. So when the boys arrived, there was nobody to help. No rescue, no supplies, no second chance. Exhausted, they crawled into small caves near the rocks. They told themselves a boat would soon pass by. They'd wave it down and sail home. Easy. But day after day went by, and not one single boat ever came close. Eta was so remote, ships almost never sailed near it. And now their deadliest enemy appeared. Thirst. A human can survive several days without any food at all, but water is a different story. Without it, the body starts shutting down in about 3 days. And on this island, there was no fresh water anywhere. They were dying of thirst, and they all knew it. Then one boy spotted a bird's nest full of eggs. Desperate, he cracked one open and drank it raw. It was absolutely revolting, but it gave him just enough to stay alive. Soon they were catching seabirds and eating them raw. Some boys threw up. The raw meat made them sick. But when it's eat or die, you eat. And now this story becomes truly unbelievable. This is the exact point where Lord of the Flies promised chaos. Fighting, bullying, every boy turning against the rest. But these 6 did the complete opposite. Instead of falling apart, they sat down together and carefully built an entire system. They split the work into teams, garden, kitchen, and lookout. Every single job rotated fairly, so that nobody ever got stuck doing only the worst work. Then they explored deeper and found a hidden gift. Wild taro, bananas, and chickens left behind a century before. They found old knives and built themselves a proper shelter, and then came their greatest victory of all, fire. They sparked a flame and never once let it die. One boy was always assigned, day and night, to guard that fire and keep it burning. That fire let them cook instead of eating raw flesh, and its smoke became their one signal to the world. But 6 teenagers, trapped for months. Of course they fought. Tempers exploded. Some arguments got ugly fast, so they made one simple rule for every fight. The 2 boys were sent to opposite ends to cool off. Hours later, they'd come back and just apologize. No grudges, no revenge. They needed each other alive. One boy even built a guitar from driftwood and wire. At night, they'd sing together to lift their spirits. But this island was never truly safe. One ordinary day, Stephen was chasing a bird along the edge of the high cliffs. He reached too far, slipped, and crashed down the rocks. He survived the fall, but badly broke his leg. No doctor, no medicine, no painkillers, nothing. For days on end, Stephen screamed in pain while the others could only watch, completely helpless. Then one boy came up with a brilliant idea. He bound the broken leg with sticks and leaves like a cast, and slowly, against all odds, the leg fully healed. Months blurred together, weeks turned into seasons. Back in Tonga, all 6 boys had been declared dead. Their parents grieved and even held their funerals. The police had closed the case long before. But on Ada, every single boy was still alive. In 15 long months, they had somehow turned a deadly trap into an actual home, a real shelter, a food garden, stored rainwater, and a fire that simply never went out. Then finally, the day they'd prayed for arrived. Stephen spotted a tiny boat far out on the water. He waved his arms, screaming and leaping on the rocks. On that boat was Peter Warner. He'd noticed strange smoke rising from an empty island. Curious, he raised his binoculars and looked closer, and saw a wild-looking boy waving frantically at him. At first, Peter assumed they were island natives. By now, the boys' clothes had rotted into rags. Then one boy swam out and shouted in perfect English. 6 schoolboys, lost 15 months, believed long dead. Stunned, Peter radioed back to Tonga to try and confirm their impossible story. And the operator on the line broke down in tears. Peter brought all 6 boys safely back home. But the story has one final, twisted ending. The moment they landed, the boys were arrested. The owner of the borrowed boat had them thrown in jail, so Peter paid for the boat out of his own pocket. In return, he earned the rights to their incredible story. And here is the part that explains why this whole story truly matters. Lord of the Flies said children would destroy each other, but the real boys of Eta proved the opposite. They shared, they forgave, they worked as one team, and that is exactly why all 6 of them survived. Peter and the boys stayed close friends for life. So now I'll leave you with one honest question. If you were stranded out there for 15 months, do you think you would have survived? Tell me below. And if this story gave you chills, subscribe right now, because the real ones are always stranger than fiction.